A warm welcome to all of you for joining us for this very important discussion on Zero UI. I want to understand from our speakers, and I'll and ask this to all of you. And the question is Zero UI a reaction to the needs of the pandemic, or is it a fad? Is it something that's going to stay and thrive in the future? Mr. Nambiar, I'll come to you first, and I'll request the others also to weigh in on this question. Mr. Nambiar?
Anisha, thank you so much. I think it's the concept has existed prior to the pandemic. It is not anything new. It's probably a nice moniker to give Zero UI. You look at things like your Xbox. Xbox in a form is just a controlled, great experience. Amazon launched an amazing retail product called Amazon Go, where your entire shopping experience was without any physical touch. So these products did exist. I think it's interesting that it now stands out because of the pandemic, because people are a little more averse to anything which has to do with the physical touch or a contact, and any technology that aids in keeping that physical distance is what the area of Zero I would be in. It could be visual, it could be speech, fundamentally, or it could be gestures. So these do exist, but I think it is just a little more exasperated in the current times for all of us to to think that can we work in an environment without having a screen in which you type. Conceptually, a Zero UI fundamentally would be it is just one answer, as opposed to you go to Google and you type a question Zero UI and you'll get some 400 responses. In a typical gesture or a speech form, you just get one answer that comes back. So that requires a lot of machine learning, intelligence, linking the question to the most appropriate response. Take Alexa, which most of us use at home. If I say, Alexa, play 90s English soft rock, 99 out of 100, you will get the kind of music you want to listen to. So the deep technology behind is what will make something like a Zero UI or a touchless environment that much more experiential and fruitful to the user who uses it. I think there are tremendous uses for Zero UI in the CX space, fundamentally where there was a lot of touch and feel. Say retail, for example, banking, ATMs. Great if there is, you move away from the typical punch in your keyword or punch in your password. Technologies have moved in that direction. I think, yes, there's tremendous applicability in real estate, which is the current industry I'm in. I think IoT, and I think there was a mention of it briefly in the previous conversations that happened. IoT is a tremendous space, very, very new, but it is all driven by motion, gesture, etc., which is not typical touch, touchpad driven. So very, very exciting. I think it's a little ahead of its time, though it does exist in today's environment. Your driverless cars are another example of similar thing, which is gesture driven, etc. So very, very interesting. Honestly, a very interesting topic to speak about, and chuffed to be on this panel. Anisha.
Mr. Doleh, Mr. Nambiar has told us that this Zero UI interface is not new. It is already there. But for people who use technology, they get into the comfort zone. And maybe I'm talking from my standpoint, or from those who are not very technology savvy. Say I've got used to a smartphone where I just touch and it works, and I'm not typing. I can scroll. So when you become comfortable in your zone, how receptive are people to newer technologies? I'm sure there must be a demand, which is why companies have innovated the technology and brought out these products. But how rapidly do people accept this change? How present do you think this Zero UI is going to be for customer experience in the years ahead?
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, for the sake of everybody who's watching, I first was told of the terminology Zero UI. I had to ask myself, what is that, right? So the first thing I'd like to do for the benefit of everybody, zero UI essentially translates into touchless interaction with technology, right? It's important that everybody understands that. So up until now, pretty much all of our interaction with anything experiential in the past, historically, it was human to human. Then with the advent of computers and smartphones and so on and so forth, it's very touch-based. So zero UI, zero user interface, really talks about the rest of the technology that's taking place that allows us to interact with different environments on a touchless basis. Now, there's an article that was issued by Forbes, which was called The Future of the Customer Experience. And there was a company called Capgemini. In the COVID times right now, 77% of customers surveyed expected that there should be some sort of touchless experience. Interestingly enough, however, it set the stage for post-COVID. They were asked, what would you expect? And 62% still expect that there would be some touchless interface. So absolutely right. This has been coming for quite some time. For example, let's look at trends, right? The trend is mobile. We're now going to wearable, and then ultimately wearable will go into implantable. So that's the march of technology. And all of that is going to augment itself into the retail space. To answer your question in terms of how readily are people willing to adopt this new technology, it depends on which generation you're talking to. If you talk to somebody like myself, Generation X, we adopt to it. If you speak to my father, he might not, he struggles a little bit more. Whereas Generation Y, right, or Generation Z for that matter, it's part of the flow. You know, I remember I had somebody tell me that their baby went up to the TV and was doing this, right? So we used to watch TV, whereas the kid is used to being able to touch a screen as an iPad. So each generation adopts and assimilates these types of technologies free flow, free form. There's no resistance whatsoever. Now, on the user AI, or on zero-based UI, right? There are essentially a couple of things that we should understand about it, right? The components of it. There is essentially, you've got haptic feedback. So anytime you're interacting, communication is a two-way street, even if you're communicating with a screen. So for example, when you're typing, you'll notice that your phone vibrates just a little bit. That is giving you mental feedback that you're touching a button, because the human mind needs that. So one of the interesting things will be, what will that feedback loop be when there is no touch point, right? Then, in terms, and already alluded to, for example, the next component is personalization, right? The zero user interface, zero UI, will allow you to have, it's going to translate into personalization. So for example, Domino's, right? When you have the Domino's app in the United States, if you come on and you have a regular order, if you don't change that order within 10 seconds, it will automatically order that order for you, right? So there's one. Another technology that's going to be featuring in the zero-based UI is voice recognition. And then there's glanceability. Voice recognition is obviously like Alexa, you command it and it does what you want it to do, right? Glanceability is the facial recognition. And then finally, as we said, gestures. Like, so for example, BMW have introduced a model where if you want to swap or change the song that you're listening to, you just do that and it moves, right? So I think we're going to find a lot more integration. Now, the question is going to be reliability, security, and essentially choice, right? And let me give you a real life example of how I believe technology will apply to, say, my world, which is in the retail shopping center business. Here's what I would imagine to happen. A customer is walking past the screen, right? And a camera that is in the screen, in the display, will track the eyeball movement of that person. Let's say that they focus on a particular item in the window, right? For a certain threshold. It knows that that person is interested in that item. As they walk past the display, then there'll be screens. A camera will capture an image of that customer and immediately 3D impose that outfit on that person, right? So instantly, where they were thinking something, it's now presented to them in a visual representation with the aim of what? With the aim of trying to get that customer to migrate into the store itself and convert that customer into a paying customer. So that's where I see artificial intelligence in the physical form taking place. There's a whole bunch of algorithmic sort of stuff that will be done to manipulate and to sort of usher in and guide customers to a particular point. Where you think that you're making your decision, you're not. You're absolutely being led to a decision point.
Mr. Doleh, this really sounds like a futuristic Hollywood movie I still feel a little circumspect. Perhaps I would question it. I mean, how could a machine read my mind? I did not even say to anybody.
Well, I mean, to answer you, right? Like, look, we are human beings, are creatures of habit, right? And it's very easy for a computer to just start monitoring you at all points in time and mapping a profile of what you like, what you're interested in, right? And be able to present a data set. Now, the big question that will remain, and I think is at the tip of everybody's tongue, is in my industry, there was always this love affair of data. We want data, we want data, we want data. But the thing that I always found failing is nobody could tell me what we should do with the data. How do I utilize the data, right? Now come the advent of AI. And a lot of people, and I may be jumping the gun a little bit here because there are a couple of questions we have, but in terms of how do you use the AI? How is AI going to assist? AI will assist, if done correctly, in bringing about focus on those items that are specific for the benefit of the business in terms of converting more customers. Right?
Right. Dr. Devnani, the way Mr. Doleh is describing it, it looks like AI is going to become my best friend in the times to come. So how accepted is this going to be? How much are we seeing the use of zero UI now? And is this going to increase manifold? Is it because preference changes have changed after the pandemic? Or is it because it is innovative, there is something new in it, people want to experiment? What's your view on zero UI and the road ahead?
The road ahead is definitely more interaction with devices. And right now, Alexa has just added a new feature where you can actually do small talk with Alexa. So you just say, Alexa, I want to do some small talk. So you can actually talk to your Alexa and say, how's your day been so far? And it will practically reply you back. And actually it was created by one of my friends who set this whole setting for them. And it's amazing what it can do. So it could be your best friend as well, or even your relative, like how we were just talking earlier. Like you could even, let's say, practice meditation with it, or ask questions related to your life, because that's how much information has been collected. Like how Rashid said, data is being collected on every interval. So every interaction you do on your computer, your mobile phone, like Google is collecting data from every device. Apple's collecting data from every device. They have so much data on you that you probably don't even know that they know so much about you right now. Now, again, it comes to how protected are we from this? Now, that is what the governments will have to do, is create regulations which protect common citizens. So China has become quite aggressive on all the tech companies, but I think this regulation has to be practiced by every country around the world to protect our privacy. But definitely more of this is happening and will come even better for us. Like my daughter, who's 17 years old right now, she is using this technology far beyond like I would be doing at 49 right now. But definitely this technology will get even more advanced, and it is there to improve our lives. So definitely we will be using it more often in every interval level. So even like interaction with government departments, interaction in banks, finance, maybe even like in your insurance, or when you are sick, probably there'll be an interactive doctor that could talk to you about your symptoms. So it is going to go far more stretched than what we have right now. And this is definitely not for now, but it'll even improve in the next 5, 10, 15 years. This will be part of our life. So definitely we are here to stay with it.
Mr. Ratnala, we've heard Dr. Devnani talk about some of the security aspects, and Mr. Doleh mentioned something about reliability. Now, the driverless car, a lot was said about incidents of accidents that took place. So, technology evolves, of course, it fits and starts. What's your view on zero UI and its usage now and in the times to come?
Hi, thank you for having me here. So, as in the first question itself, you asked, right, whether the pandemic is driving zero UI. Definitely health and safety issues are definitely driving the market for touchless interfaces. The transition to hands-free and screenless landscape with some smart interfaces is definitely revolutionizing the every touch point. And of course, for every industry, there is a need for a strategy that is purely human centric, which also maintains the efficiency, security, privacy, and choice. But coming to the reliability part, so basically, I feel that there are around 3 success factors for Zero UI. As Rashid mentioned, first one is the reliability, right? So ensuring that the technology works for different kinds of users and in every possible environment, the functionality must be, repeatable. The second success factor is the security. Both Rashid and Doctor were talking about is the security, which is like if we are deploying a touchless environment for access or authentication, you have to ensure that we are developing a secured interface. The one of the examples could be like 2-factor authentications. And most important is the customer's choice. Given the the user's time to learn the new behaviors, it's a massive change management. Switching completely to a contactless environment may leave them feeling helpless. So deploying a traditional mode of interaction along with a touchless interface is necessary, to avoid making them uncomfortable with like voice or the gestures or the 3D eye tracking or the gesture recognition and all of that. So I think from my perspective, the AI embedded non-touch interfaces will be developed over time. It's not going to happen like in the next year itself. Although this has been a journey, Ajay Nambiar had talked about certain examples like Siri, Alexa, and all. But with the widespread of adoption and expanded acceptance, we'll definitely be able to personalize every interaction to individual users.
All right, Mr. Nambiar, where does the onus lie? On who does the onus lie to greater adoption of Zero UI for customer engagement and taking the improving the customer journey? As a customer, I may not know anything about Zero UI. I don't know whether it is better than what I already use. Who's going to take the first step? Is the company going to come and say, see, I got a better interface for you. I got a better way for you to interact with me. Or is the customer going to say, can you do something better for me? So who does the onus lie with? And can you give us an example? We've heard about Mr. Doleh talk about, walking across a screen and, you're going to be given a suggestion about an outfit that you could try and how it would look on you. Could you give us more examples on, how the customer journey could improve using touchless interface?
Thanks, Anisha. I think it's typically a chicken and egg question. That will always be a dilemma. Who's the source? It's never an easy answer. I think I'll just take off a little bit on what Lalit said. The way the adoption of anything new is gradual. It cannot be a switch it on tomorrow and everybody is suddenly become touchless. It doesn't work. I think to that extent, the advantage we are in today are a couple of factors. One, a lot of this pre-exists, and that's thanks to the new generation today, where their belief is less of human contact and more of things which are automated, where I don't need to meet people. One. Second, ease of use. We would like to have something which can get the job done much quicker because we have lesser time, we don't have patience. The third factor is convenience, right? That I want it at the time that I need it, not when you give it. Now, these have existed for quite some time, and I think technologies have wrapped around that. If I can speak so, right? That's let me give an example, and this is my own personal experience. I was booking an airline ticket for my daughter. She was, of course, flying for her higher studies, and I just happened to book a ticket on one of these aggregation sites, and it booked the ticket on a website called kiwi.com. I've never heard of it before. I got a reference number. And then, of course, I panicked a little because I didn't know what was happening to the booking. So I called that number and I landed on a typical IVRS, which all of us are familiar with. But I was pleasantly surprised. It asked me to read out the number and not type out the number. Now, that was my first experience. Now, here's an international website making a booking for somebody who's sitting in India. To be able to recognize my my dialect or the way I speak even a number. So I said, okay, it's an interesting thing. And us being in the CX space, looking at a customer journey, it's very interesting to look at some adoption of that nature on a global scale. So I read out the number and voila, it was instant. It recognized my number. It recognized my name. It gave me the booking details. I was fascinated. Now, this is natural language processing, as we call it. Technology exists, but for them to be able to fine tune it to understand my dialect or the way I speak English. And I think on this forum, 5 of us have a different tonal quality. Our voice modulation is different. To me, that was an outstanding customer experience without having to speak to anybody. And yet the technology was that robust enough to give me the details. I didn't have to do anything. Instantly, there was an email that came into my mailbox if I wanted further information. But I actually completed my transaction. And on all the forums that I speak, I actually use that as an example to say, at such a basic level, it took care of a need for me. And I was, well, astonished that it could recognize my tone. Now, it didn't force me. I could even type it in. So it didn't force me to say only speak. It said you could either type or you could speak. I think that's in any technology or adoption. I think Rashid spoke about how it would come into retail. Now, tomorrow, if he opens a supermarket with no human being, you just walk in and everything is touchless, people will walk around blind. We are used to, at least Indians, subcontinent, are used to touch and feel. I have this other debate, will people stop picking up the phone and calling? Will we move towards complete chat-based or AI-enabled chatbots? In India, no. In India, people still want to speak to someone, maybe more to have a conversation, as Lalit mentioned earlier that, I'm sorry, I think it was Doctor who mentioned that Alexa also has a new module that says, do you want to have a short conversation with me? We love having conversations. We love talking to a human being rather than a chat bot. So I think that will never go. It'll never cease, but there'll be a wider adoption. Statistics prove that, but I think the hybrid model will always work. And I'm sorry, I'll just take a minute more, Anisha. I come from, my primary background was hotels. And I'll give that as a classic example. If you ever walk into a Ritz-Carlton, or in Indian context, the Oberois, they will never not have people to greet you. I mean, it's not possible. However, I mean, with technology, they would be able to know every preference of yours down to, what tone of feather do you use in your pillow. Now that's outstanding. They know what kind of, cologne you use. So when you land up there, the cologne would be there in your, in your toiletry set. But there will be a human interface. And I'm a firm believer, there is no substitute for a human interface. Transactions can go on to artificial intelligence, AI, chatbot technology, but that human interface is what always will make the difference. Just my take on that.
All right. Mr. Nambiar, I request a short answer. You gave us this example of, the screen talking to you, asking you your preferences. How did you feel? Good, taken aback, or were you outraged?
Sorry, Anisha, I just lost you on the last part. I couldn't hear you on the last part.
I just wanted to understand, how did you feel when the screen was talking back to you when you didn't expect it? Did you feel great? Did you feel shocked, or were you outraged?
I think the first one. I was blown. And anything, I'm a sucker for technology. Honestly, I'm a sucker for technology. I was just blown that something like this exists. So always positive. There's no doubt about it.
All right. Dr. Devnani, we've heard of some examples. Could you show us how customer experience improves because of a touchless user interface?
See, the whole idea is the touchless experience is a 24/7, 365-day experience. There's no limitations on time. And that's what the generation X and Y require from life. They do not want to wait for the office to open at 9 and work till 5. So definitely that's what the key benefits are here. And it cuts down the manpower needed. So for companies who are looking at the bottom line, it's all about saving money. And of course, as you can see, talent pool also is limited right now because more and more companies want talented people. So you have to work with a very thin group of people that can help. Right now, the tech space actually has a shortage of manpower in the US. And this will happen throughout the world because more companies have to improve on their technology so that they can improve the customer experience as well the employee experience. So it is a good thing, but as long as it's being monitored or regulated, then it will go and improve our lives.
Mr. Doleh, could you show us an example of how zero UI technologies are used for personalization, seamless experience, from say seeing something on a website, going to a store, the entire customer journey. You gave us the
So-
example of retail, but
Sure.
how does it work end to end for the customer journey?
Okay, well, I think, okay, first of all, I'd like to highlight something. In terms of the three components that we talked about, which was for the success of the user or zero UI, was reliability, security, and then the last one was choice. See, the one thing that troubles me, and I think will trouble some people, is that on an app or on a phone, it is a choice. Once we are in a zero UI base or a UX environment, it's no longer a choice. That camera is tracking my eyeballs, whether I like it or not. I am being monitored and I'm taken. So I'm no longer purposefully or by permission granting and participating, right? I'd like to give you some examples. In 2020, there was the value of gesture-based recognition, mainly 3D cameras, was about, say, $9.8 billion, okay? It is projected that by 2025, that market will grow to $32.3 billion. Another one is eye tracking technology. Right now, sits at $368 million in total value. By the year 2025, will be worth $1.1 billion. Google is working on a microchip, which is a radar microchip, okay? It's called the Google Solai. And essentially it will monitor the movement. Now, come back to your question. In terms of what a typical zero UI experience may look like. Well, we have the glimmers of it already. For example, with Alexa. Alexa has joined up with Uber, right? If Uber and Alexa understand your location, you could just say, Alexa, order me an Uber, and it orders, right? The similar sort of tie-up is taking place with Starbucks and Alexa, where you just say, Alexa, order me my Starbucks. It knows what your order is, and it starts to come to you. Coming back in terms of how it may be based, like, let's take the hotel example of the Ritz, okay? If you remember, there was this thing called Google Glass, right? Which was essentially glasses which project into it a screen so that the person who's looking looks as if they're wearing clear glasses, but they're being projected an image. Something to that effect may be worn by hotel staff utilizing the CCTV cameras, which are everywhere, in everything and everywhere we look. Facial recognition identifies the customer walking through, and it's Mr. Jones. So they say, welcome, Mr. Jones. Now, depending on where your brand sits, are you a formal brand? Are you an informal brand? May determine whether you call him Mr. Jones or whether you call him John, right? That gets you the ability to set the tone of where you want to create the experience. Because I think at the end of the day, and this is really important, UX. X is the most important part, because what we're doing is we are experiencing. So all of this is in the is with one aim, which is maximizing the experience. Very much, I agree that ultimately the human will never be removed. I will give you personal experience. And speaking about the recognition, the voice recognition, right? How many times and how many of us have been frustrated in your car, whatever it is, play this song. I'm sorry, I didn't understand you, right? So unless the technology is matching and it's reliable, then that's going to be a very sort of dampened user experience. Now, I once spoke to a supermarket chain, right? And this guy was an older CEO, right? He was an older gentleman. And he says, isn't it funny how things repeat themselves? He says, when I was a boy, he says, groceries, the milkman would bring milk to my house. The butcher would bring meat to my house. The farmer would bring the eggs, right? And the baker would bring the bread. Then we shifted to where all those products were taken into a central point called a supermarket, and everybody would go to the supermarket. And yet look at us now, where now again, through Amazon and the likes, everything is being delivered home, back to your house. So ultimately, I think that in the face of this user experience, the ultimate experience will become the human, right? So it is augmentation. Now, but does that mean, okay, I think a lot of the audience may be wondering, okay, well, how do we use this technology? How do we implement it into our business? And it is precisely that, using artificial intelligence, right? Essentially what would happen is a couple of things, right? In AI, you got to look at two things, right? The AI is compiling information for you about your customer, creating profiles, but then how do you use it? So in AI, you want to look at the context, right? And you want to look at the content, right? The context tells you what your customer is after. I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody just says that they want to order Chinese, right? They like Chinese and they order Chinese. So they put in restaurants near me on the website, okay? Now, it will already have a profile and the algorithms will run, so we will know that this person orders Chinese 2 times a week on a Sunday and a Monday, so bring the Chinese offer up first and Mexican will be down 5th, right? And so that's the type of thing. So now, then ultimately, in terms of content, what I mean there is, if you are getting data or rich data that's really live and really heavy with very contextual sort of information, you may start to understand as a business that, you know what, in this part of town, we have this type of customer who will respond better to this type of promotion, right? So now your marketing spend will become much more specific based on the zone that you're going in. And, you know, the typical sort of engagement, you know, in old days, if you spent money, if you got a 2% participation, you were doing well, right? I would expect the companies will now expect far better results from their marketing spend. And then, you know, really privacy is very, very important. And I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? People, so if I asked you this, would you allow me to come into your home and just study you? You would reject completely. But what nobody realizes is this tech is sitting right beside you every moment, everywhere you're going, every passing thought, and it is recording you. You know, so when I think it was a doctor who said, forgive me if I get the wrong person, but regulation and privacy laws is going to become really, really important, really important. And I think there's a fine line, right, where it's augmenting my experience versus invading my space. And I think companies have to be very careful in when they do that, right? Last thing I'll say to you is, as a flag, I would tell you, use AI and use any technology with one aim in mind, which is delight your customer, right? Forgive me, who was it that was speaking about his interaction with the voice, right? Right?
Mr. Nambiar.
Nambiar, sorry, thank you. So Mr. Nambiar was delighted. See, he had that experience and he was delighted. Technology delighted him. However, if I call my bank and what's her name? I forget. Nora, let's call her, right? Nora annoys me because I can't get to a human being, right? So I think it's going to, and it's an evolving process. The gentlemen of the panel are absolutely right. It's evolutionary and it is a feedback loop. It is not company dictates to customer. It is company tries something, customer gives some feedback, it evolves, it improves, it evolves, it improves, and that's the feedback loop that will always be.
Mr. Ratnala, in your experience, where have you seen zero interface work very well, especially post-pandemic? We've got a few examples. We have Alexa. We also have robots who greet you at a hospital reception. They take down your details, give you a coupon. You don't necessarily have to interact with a human to get your work done, which is wait for your appointment or wait to see the doctor. So in your experience, where has this worked, and how does it impact the customer journey and his experience?
So I think during the pandemic, everyone were worried about, touching the doors or touching the buttons in the lift elevators, right? So I think some of the countries have already gone into the space where the lift elevators or the elevators basically are, operated by voice recognition. If the customer says that, hey, take me to the 7th floor, the elevator takes them to the 7th floor. So basically, I think voice has overall proven to be a faster alternative of either touching or typing, allowing the hands-free experiences to be exchanged with the small audience, even without having the touchpad. So basically, the touchless and zero UI, although have a long journey ahead, but generally the enterprises will have to reconsider everything, either from branding or promotions, even to the customer and employee involvement. So any involvement which is required, they'll have to think all over again. But on the technical side, as of today in 2021, speech recognition systems are still unable to detect certain accents or speeches in loud environments, just for example. And also there are certain instructions are not being correctly followed by even the famous instruments like Alexa, etc. So just for example, if you ask Siri that, hey, who is the 4th US president, it will definitely answer you. It's a single line of instruction and it answers you back. And if you ask, can you just call my dad, it definitely does. But if you tell, hey Siri, can you just find out who is the 4th president and call my dad, and again come back with me to answering a 5th US president, then it'll just go all over, right? So such kind of algorithms will have to be really built well with all these devices. So basically, to resolve these pitfalls, it is very, very important to strengthen the underlying algorithms and the techniques. It must be for sure human-centered and with a comprehensive personal information.
All right, and the privacy is important, but I'm sure these teething troubles can be fixed by more testing, more feedback, and once you've already started out on the path, I'm sure it gets better from here on. Dr. Devnani, how do we mitigate the ambiguity with AI, ML, and deep learning? Test, retest, feedback. Is that how it works? Because in a country like ours, we still don't have formidable privacy laws, internet privacy laws. So where does it leave companies operating in these countries? Should they move fast and try out these products if there is a little leg room to try things and not be held responsible because the law is still being formulated? What should be the strategy?
See, right now, most of this new technology being tested only in environments where the regulatory requirements are limited. So in fact, you'll be surprised, more of this technology is being tested in Africa, in third world countries, wherever there are lapse regulations. And once it is tried, tested, then they are gradually bringing it into what we call developed economies, where they can actually benefit from this technology. Now, obviously, as I said earlier, we need the government to build frameworks, and gradually, surely, the citizens are asking the governments to put these regulations up. Initially, citizens thought that technology will improve their lives, but now, as Rashid said earlier, technology also has been kind of stretched to levels where we no longer are in control of what we are, providing the kind of information to these companies. So it might hurt us in the long run, but definitely it will improve our experience in life overall, because at the end of the day, we can only do so much otherwise, because our days are getting shorter, because we have so much more overwhelm of work happening. We are trying to balance our work-life experiences. So the whole thing of this is to improve that whole work-life experience. So definitely there will be issues because this is still new, but let us say in the next 5, 10, 15 years, I'm sure the government will put frameworks that will regulate this, and it will improve our overall experience of interaction. So definitely I am pro in this idea.
Ms. Nambiar, how do I decide my strategy as a company? Because there is this technology which is available. I could try to use it. And, the thing with technology, it works and moves faster than the policymakers. See, in the case of Bitcoin, and blockchain. There was only one Bitcoin a few years ago, and now there's so many, digital currencies. Central banks in here coming out with their own currencies. But there's still ambiguity about amongst regulators and what is the status of Bitcoin in our country. So, as a company, what should we do? Should we, take the technology and run with it? Should we wait for regulation? Because, I mean, for all those people who put up a Bitcoin exchange, they ran into a lot of trouble 2 years back after the Supreme Court order. So, how should one approach this? Because you want your customer to be wowed, and you know that there is something that could, make that experience even better. How do you decide this way or the other?
Thanks, Anisha. Very relevant question. My firm belief is that I call it, there's a lot of noise. Any new technology, suddenly there is a lot of noise around a new technology. And one of the failings, and I'll start with the failing and then talk about where I come from, if that's okay. The failings is that we just bow down to peer pressure of saying, oh, you know what, my competition has got it, let me also get it. Now, unfortunately, that may have no practical use, but you just want to be there because somebody else has it. And then you put up all fancy, jazzy marketing, messages saying, we have AI-enabled chatbot. But nobody ever comes and asks a question because you've forgotten the basic. The basic is, what does your customer need? Where I come from is, what's the customer's problem? I'd like to address a problem. If technology can sort that problem out, you can use any technology. Let's just take AI-enabled chatbot. I mean, that's the buzzword for the last 4 or 5 years. I have not used that till at least 24 months after setting the basic operations in place. Now, after that operation is in place, if a customer has to go to the chatbot, he must have a ready-made answer to the question that he has. And the only way he will have that answer is if I've got a robust engine behind where all the frequently asked questions over the last 2 years, 24 months, have been entered. And hence, when he comes on board and he finds it, he says, wow, I got the answer. And he says, hey, thank you. If that doesn't happen, then whatever you may, and a lot of dollars are spent in these expensive technologies without its practical use. We are talking of, one simple thing is of AI enabled. Let me talk of the other, which also in real estate, people started speaking about is mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, right? And earlier it was just virtual reality. Then we found virtual reality is a problem because you were on that heavy thing and you're in a time zone, which is you alone. And, then it becomes, you have to touch an equipment. And then it was, augmented reality and mixed reality. All this is great, but unless there is a use case which emanates from the customer, my belief is emanates from the customer. If you can link that and stitch that to a technology that's available and sort that problem out, I think you have a winner. It's a basic fundamental answer to any question on should I adopt it and when should I adopt it, is identify if you need it. And that is by what the customer is telling you. If so, then you have a winner. It'll work.
All right. Let's hope the customer is imaginative on how, what could be the means by which his needs could be fulfilled. Mr. Doleh, how is Zero UI pushing the human elements to be at the center of customer experience? Because we all know if the customer is your focus, in all likelihood you will succeed. So does Zero UI push, the human element at the center of experience?
Okay, first of all, I'd really like to sort of resonate what Ajay said, because I think he's absolutely spot on. I think there is a romance with technology for technology's sake, and he couldn't be more accurate in saying only use the technology that you need to best your customer. That's it, right? Don't have the technology that you just because everybody else has got it. I completely agree. Now, to come back to your question, in terms of the Zero UI and its influence. So here's the thing, right? How many of us would have thought sitting around, right? And here's the bit where there's a breakdown in terms of let it come from the customer. Facebook. Did anybody ask for Facebook? No, right? That didn't come from the customer. It was an idea that somebody came up with, and put it out to the customer, and then the feedback loop started taking place. So the first snowball that needs to roll down the hill that then picks up momentum and picks up snow usually comes from somebody wacky, right? Who just has a crazy idea and then they want to do it. So in terms of zero UI, right? Look, just to actually sort of build upon that bit in terms of you don't have to have the greatest tech. I'll give you an example. In COVID, right? The guys who had their website that included a WhatsApp chat where the customer, like, so for example, there was a cake guy, right? Selling cakes, you can order online, but you know what they found? When they put that WhatsApp chat and the customer could say, I need this cake, I need that, the conversion went crazy. Just because they had that communication mode, which was much more personable than online. So there's an example of technology much more basic than anything artificially intelligent that works really, really well. Here's how I would expect what we're ultimately going towards, which is UX, right? The user experience, right? With all the bells and whistles, right? Is typical morning, you'll wake up, right? And it will wake you up, the alarm will go on. It will play your favorite tune. It will order your coffee, right? It will plan your route. You will get to your destination. It will pay your parking ticket or your fee, and it'll book your favorite restaurant. And so now, what's the one thing that every human being is going to gain out of this, right? We're gaining the single greatest currency on the planet, time.
More time.
Right? And yet, look at how we squander time, because now we have all this extra time. What do? We bury our face in the phone. We look at our Instagram account. We look at people who have nothing to do with our life, right? So if using this as a platform and as a message to get out to the public, right? As much as we're talking about augmenting and enhancing the customer experience, I would say, everybody think about your time. Think about how you use technology to improve your life. And that goes for every one of us on a personal basis and on a corporate basis, because just like you want to live your life, take that moral and ethic code and build it into your customer, because guess what? Into your business, because your customer believes in the same thing.
That's true. Mr. Ratnala, we're closing up this discussion, and very important points, thought-provoking points raised by our panelists. Now, what do you think? Do you think touchless interfaces are built because they are thinking of the human and they're thinking of the experience the human will have, and hence they are being made? Do you think they will be adopted and welcomed with open arms?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, this is a massive change management, right? Like it will be adopted over a period of time, not like from tomorrow itself. Also, as Rashid mentioned, that there are certain set of customers, in fact, the majority of the customers who are asking or who have, given their response in the survey that they are expecting a non-touch interactions with the devices, which means that there are these customers who are expecting that technology would evolve, and hence, there would be the industries which will come up with these set of technologies. But is it going to happen tomorrow or next year? It's a long journey. It's a very long journey.
All right. So it will take time. We need a lot of blocks, the puzzle pieces to fall into place when it comes to reliability, more testing, better regulatory conditions, and of course, the demand and the need for these technologies to be used. But it was great to hear from you on touchless interfaces, what lies ahead, what's being adopted, what are the possibilities. Thank you all for joining us this evening and sharing with us your insights. Mr. Doleh, you would like to add something towards the close?
Just a closing comment. What I would say to you, and really to finalize my answer to you when you said, how is it going to drive it? I think for everybody, right? Expect zero-based UI to delight, right? You will have some delightful experiences. The question is, at what price? That's all, right? You walk into a hotel, they will know your name, they will know your favorite drink, they will remember your birthday, they'll remember your daughter's birthday, and they'll have a little teddy for it. You're going to be delighted, right? But at what price? That's it. Thank you.
The customer is going to decide that. and let him make the right choice, because along with security and reliability, choice is the most important bit, which Mr. Doleh talked about. Thank you, Mr. Doleh, Mr. Ratnala, Dr. Devnani, Mr. Nambiar. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing us your views on the future of touchless interfaces in the world ahead, the technologies that can be used, and the choices that customers can have. Thank you so much.